Sometimes just a few words are all it takes to spark an absolute firestorm. So today we're going to dig into how a single comment managed to shake a 75-year-old military alliance right to its core. What happens when the very idea of shared sacrifice gets called into question by a leader? Well, let's get into it.
Wow, that is a raw and powerful statement from Dr. Patrick Bury, a former British infantry captain who was on the ground in Afghanistan. You can just feel the sting in those words, right? A real sense of profound disrespect. And, what's so striking about this is that it's not just about politics for him. For a veteran who was there, this is personal. So what on earth was said that got such a strong reaction from a soldier who fought literally shoulder to shoulder with American troops? To understand that, we've got to go back to the comment that started this whole thing.
Okay, so it all kicked off with some remarks former President Donald Trump made to Fox News. He was giving his take on how NATO allies really contributed over in Afghanistan. And there it is. That's the comment that caused, as one reporter put it, an awful lot of upset. The claim he's making is pretty simple, pretty direct, that when the fighting got tough in Afghanistan, America's NATO allies kind of hung back. That claim was heard all around the world, and believe me, the response was immediate. The official political reaction came in fast, and it came from one of America's closest allies, the United Kingdom. And their response wasn't just some stuffy diplomatic statement, it was personal. 457. Just look at that number for a second. Before I even tell you what it is, I want you to see it. It's not a budget item or some random piece of data. Behind this number are stories, families, and lives. This is the human cost for the United Kingdom. Just the UK, 457 service members who never made it home. And that number doesn't even touch the more than 2,000 who were badly injured, many with absolutely life-changing wounds. So that is the context for the outrage. And this was the official word from the UK Prime Minister. He did not mince words, calling the remarks insulting and appalling. He talked about the hurt it caused the families of those who were killed and injured, and he made it clear this wasn't just a political thing. The pain was felt across the whole country. But maybe the most powerful response didn't come from a politician. It came from someone who was actually there. So let's go back to Dr. Patrick Bury, who shared what he saw from the front lines of Helmand Province.
Now, if you just glance at the data here, it tells a really important story. Of course, the United States suffered the highest number of casualties, no question. But that doesn't tell the whole story. Dr. Bury points out that if you look at the losses relative to the size of a country's military, nations like Denmark and the UK paid an incredibly high price. And this gets to the very heart of it. On one side, you have the claim that allies held back. On the other, you have a veteran's reality. Dr. Bury says he commanded both British soldiers and U.S. Marines in the very same platoon. They evacuated their wounded and their dead, together. The point is, on the ground, they weren't separate forces. They were one. Dr. Bury uses a very specific word to describe this bond, brotherhood. And look, this isn't just some casual term he's throwing around. It's a sacred bond that gets forged under fire, where your nationality doesn't matter nearly as much as the person fighting next to you. And to question that, he says, is what makes the comment so deeply, deeply insulting. Okay, now, to be fair, the situation in Afghanistan was incredibly complicated. And Dr. Bury himself actually adds a layer of nuance here that's really important if we're going to understand the full picture. He acknowledges that, yeah, it's a fact that some NATO countries, because of their own national politics, chose to operate in safer areas, or they put restrictions on what their troops were allowed to do. But, and this is a huge but, he stresses that other nations, like the Danes, the Dutch, the Canadians, they fought incredibly hard right alongside the Americans in the most dangerous places. So the main takeaway is a blanket statement just dismissing all Allied contributions. It just doesn't line up with reality. So this one incident, it actually opens up a much bigger conversation about the health and maybe even the future of the entire NATO alliance. If that shared history gets questioned, what's holding it all together? And this is the big strategic question at the center of it all. I mean, let's put feelings of brotherhood and respect aside for just a second. Is there a practical, self-interested reason for the United States to stay committed to this alliance? Well, according to the analysis, the answer is a resounding yes. Because NATO isn't just about shared values. It's about shared assets. The U.S. relies on military bases all across Europe, uses shared sensors and listening stations, and depends on logistical and intelligence cooperation that would be crazy expensive and difficult to build from scratch.
These are real, tangible, strategic advantages.
And that brings us back to this quote from Dr. Burry, which it really sums the whole thing up, doesn't it? Alliances, he's arguing, they're not just business deals. They are built on a foundation of shared history and a mutual respect for sacrifice. And when you start chipping away at that foundation, the whole thing gets weaker and the world becomes a more dangerous place.
So we're left with this: words have power. They can build bridges or they can burn them down. And when the memory of shared sacrifice becomes something to argue about, it forces you to ask a really tough question. Can an alliance survive on just strategy and logistics when its very heart, that bond of brotherhood, is broken? That's something to think about.